So basically today, someone that sucks at vibes and aesthetics will recommend you autumn vibe books. Hi friends and welcome back to my channel. I feel like it's been ages since I filmed a sit down video, and it kind of has been. Life is a mess, I'm trying to make things work, bear with me. Today I thought I would make an autumn book recommendations video. The thing is, I very rarely make recommendation videos. I feel like I can struggle with gathering up a good bunch of books for a specific recommendation or something. Also, I suck at vibes and I suck at aesthetics. Trying to make something work with a vibe or an aesthetic, I don't know that. I'm quite excited about this one, just to chat about a few books I read, because I haven't really been reading either, so at least talking about when I used to read might make me want to read more. Look, I put a little pumpkin behind me. That's another thing. I'm not really that person that, I adore fall and autumn, that's not it, but I'm not, and perhaps it's a Swedish thing, I'm not really that massively into Halloween. I rarely go to Halloween parties. That might just be because I'm never invited, or it might be because my friends don't really do Halloween parties. But yeah, I put a little pumpkin here, and I actually would love to have some more Halloweenish, fallish decorations in my apartment, so I might look into that. Although my apartment is still fairly fallish with purple curtains, red bed sheets. My color palette already is by default fall. Okay, let's do the books now. I've gathered a few books that I would consider to be fall-ish, have fallish vibes, a mix of genres as well. We have some fantasies, we have some contemporaries, some horror, some thrillers. I'm just excited to talk about them, so I've divided them into different categories, and let's just get started, I think. So for the categories we have cozy books, or at least what I would consider to be a cozy book. We also have more spooky books or horror books. We have thrillers, and I think as a final category, did I even have a final category? I didn't. I have 3 categories. So we have cozy books, spooky books, and this is going great. We have cozy books, spooky books, and thrillers. Great. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the smallest categories, shall we? Let's start with horror. Now, the thing is, I don't really read horror, not because I don't want to. It's not a genre I'm drawn to, I guess. I just am typically drawn to other books and other genres. But recently, I've been playing with the idea of actually getting more into horror, a lot more into horror. And it would be so much fun to actually make a vlog out of that experience. So, I want you to dare me to read the scariest books you've ever read. Please leave me your horror book recommendations in the comments, and feel free to recommend the scariest book you ever read. I know I'm gonna eat this up, the minute I start with this experiment. But I don't really read horror, I don't really watch horror movies either, but I don't feel like I'm that easily scared. I might get scared by films or by being alone and I hear weird sounds. I'm having a hard time imagining getting scared by a book. I know myself that a book can bring out a lot of emotions. I have bawled my eyes out when reading a book. I have been grossed out when I read a book. I have been very emotionally invested in books. But I don't think I ever really felt scared. I'm gonna eat this up, I know it. But please, leave me your horror book recommendations, and I might do a reading horror books for the first time video. Let's start. The first few books I'm gonna talk about is actually a series, and that is the Warm Bodies series. Yes, I am currently reading this one for a vlog. We have the first book in the series is Warm Bodies. The second book in the series is The New Hunger, which is technically a prequel. Then we have the actual sequel, second book in the series, chronological in order of how the events play out, is The Burning World. And I just today started the final book in the series, which is called The Living. These are books that were published between 2012 and 2018, I think. So they are fairly recent, but they are also a bit reminiscent of how books were 10 years ago. If we start with Warm Bodies. Warm Bodies it's quite a simple plot, I would say. It's about a zombie named R and a human named Julie. It's a post-apocalyptic book. It's a dystopia. The world has gone to shit. We have zombies everywhere, and the zombies are killing people. They are eating their brains. Things are bad, basically. So it is sort of a horror-esque setting, I would say. But the thing is, we follow R, the story is told from his point of view, and he is just the most charming and amazing and sweetest zombie ever, really, and like funny as well. He's kind of like a philosophical bachelor, and you can tell that he is quite conflicted about the situation. He meets Julie, he instantly falls for Julie, he saves Julie. A sort of connection develops between them, and this connection between them actually starts to stir something within R and within the other zombies. It is a star-crossed lovers Romeo and Juliet, but with a horror zombie setting. For me, this book in particular has a lot of humor. It's very funny, actually. It's very witty in the way it's written. R is hilarious. One thing in this series especially, like as overall in the series, is there's a lot of commentary on our society. The zombie thing isn't what caused the apocalypse. The zombie thing is a byproduct, an effect of the apocalypse, of what happened. It is horror-esque in its vibes, but mainly I think this is just great autumn vibes book because it's fun, it's kind of cozy, it's kind of heartfelt, but we also have that like setting of an apocalypse, of zombies. We also have the prequel, The New Hunger. This takes place before the events of Warm Bodies, and this definitely has more comments on our society compared to the first book. A really interesting read as well, and I very recently finished The Burning World, and I actually love this one. It's not amazing, it's a bit messy, but it's so heartfelt. Like there are so many heartwarming moments in this one, and once again it's quite horror-esque with the shits that's going down in the world and like apocalypse and shit. I would actually really recommend this series if you want something with zombies that won't really scare you, can be a tad bit gory, I guess, but not like, it's not really gory compared to what I can imagine many other books are. I think the writing in them, especially in this one, is quite beautiful, actually. People really don't know about these books, I feel like. I feel like they go under the radar or something. But yeah, I would recommend them. I think they are entertaining, they're good, character-driven, and a bit of like that autumn-fall vibes, horror-esque vibes. The second recommendation I have for this horror category, and this is the last recommendation I have as well, is Horrid by Katerina Leno, and this is actually a young adult horror book, and it's very atmospheric. And I read this because it's actually my friend Jane's, one of her favorite books. It's about this girl and her mother, and they move to a new city and they move to this new house. It's a big old house. It's a typical haunted mansion sort of story or trope, or at least the setup of it. And things just start to get really weird in this house. It's not really scary, I would say, but it's very atmospheric. Kind of a good option if you want the vibes, but don't necessarily want the actual, like, scary part of it. Those were the horror books. Let's move on to thrillers. The thing is, I haven't really read that many thrillers, and I feel like the thrillers I have read are usually quite underwhelming for me. I don't think I've found the type of thrillers I love yet. I'm still searching for them, I'm still looking for them, so feel free to give me thriller recommendations as well, actually. There are a few that have stood out to me. The first one is one I read earlier this year, and I actually had it as an ARC, and that is The Island House by Amanda Brittney. I don't quite remember the story of this, unfortunately, but the thing that I remember is that I was actually creeped out when I read this, already from the first or second chapter. I think the author just did a great way of building up suspense throughout the entire book. It's about this girl, and her father was quite famous. I'm not certain if he was a painter or something, and he recently passed. And someone reaches out to her because they have a hotel at an island, and in that hotel they have a painting that her father made. I think that's the story. They invite her to come to their hotel to stay there. She can bring a friend, and she goes there and things just goes to shits. And it's this sort of thing also when there are two parallel stories, if I remember correctly. So we have current times, but we also have another story going on in parallel. And yeah, I just think the author here was great at building up suspense. And it really stood out to me because I was so creeped out from the first couple of chapters or something. Another thriller that I listened to as an audiobook a few years back is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. And I highly, highly recommend you to listen to this one as an audiobook, because there's a thing, like the audiobook is great. And there is a part of it that will really creep you out. At least it did for me. I had to replay that part because I was just so shocked at what was happening. It's about this girl, and she's going away on a trip with her boyfriend. I think they're going to his parents' place over Christmas or over a holiday or something. Basically, during this entire time, we are in her mind and we hear her thoughts about how she's thinking of ending things, like ending their relationship. I don't remember much about why this book stood out so much to me, other than the fact that it gets weird, but interesting. The audiobook is great. I don't want to spoil too much, because I do truly think this is one of the books that you should go into blind. I remember I gave it 5 stars. It is incredible, and I know many other people have enjoyed this book as well, so I do really recommend it. If you haven't heard about it, check it out. If you have heard about it, see this as your sign to actually read it and pick it up. From what I remember, I really did enjoy the writing. I thought it was really interesting to follow this character's thoughts as well, because she was both really frustrating and annoying, and also annoyingly relatable in so many ways. And that's probably the worst part, when you hate a character, but you also feel like you can relate to them. That's the second thriller I wanted to mention. The final thriller I want to talk about is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I think this is so far my only Gillian Flynn book. I do have Gone Girl. I will read it at some point. But yeah, Sharp Objects. This one is another one that is low-key, creepy and interesting. It's very, very triggering. Trigger warnings for everything, basically. It's about Camille Preaker. She is a journalist, I think. And she goes home to her old hometown to investigate the disappearance of 2 little girls. And she has a very strained relationship with her family, and there's some sort of family tragedy taking place as well. I found it to be very intriguing and interesting, but it can also really trip you up, I think. So the list of trigger warnings for this one. We have alcoholism, animal cruelty, attempted murder, corpse description, drugs, drug abuse, eating disorder, emotional abuse, gore, mental illness, murder, parental favoritism, rape, self-harm, sexual assault, self-harm scars, suicide, and verbal abuse. I had a good time reading it, even though it's quite awful. Those were the thrillers I wanted to talk about. Final category, and the biggest category, is cozy books. Now, cozy is a very broad definition, I would say, but we will get to that. One series that I would recommend, especially now for like the fall time, the autumn time, and also like transitioning to winter perhaps. The series I want to talk about is the Bear Town series. Where do I start with this one? Hi, my name is Charlotte. My favorite author is Fredrik Backman, and he is the author of the Bear Town series. Bear or bear? I feel like I keep messing this up. Is it Bear Town? I'm gonna try and say bear, and we're gonna have to see. Bear Town is about this town in the northern part of Sweden. I already mentioned that. And this town, all they care about is hockey. Their hearts, their beings beats for hockey. Everyone is interconnected, and everyone has some type of relationship to the sport, to the team, to the city. The entire town gets turned upside down. Things get flipped around when the star of the junior team rapes the daughter of the sport chief of the hockey teams. It just becomes this conflict in the entire town. People are taking sides. I'm so bad at explaining this book, but that's because you need to read it. You need to experience it. I'm gonna read it from Goodreads or something, because I can't really convey how important this book is. It says here, a tiny community nestled deep in the forest is slowly losing ground to the ever-encroaching trees. The junior ice hockey team is about to compete in the national semifinals, and they actually have a shot at winning. All the hopes and dreams of this place now rest on the shoulders of a handful of teenage boys. Being responsible for the hopes of an entire town is a heavy burden, and the semifinal match is the catalyst for a violent act that will leave a young girl traumatized and a town in turmoil. Accusations are made, and like ripples on a pond, they travel through all of Beartown, leaving no resident unaffected. Beartown explores the hopes that bring a small community together, the secrets that tear it apart, and the courage it takes for an individual to go against the grain. Let's go with that. So this is the first book, which is like direct aftermath of everything that happens. This one takes place 6 months later, and this one, the third book and final book that I believe was just released in English, Lucky You, is like 2 years later. And throughout these books we follow this amazing cast of characters. I love them all so much, they are my babies. I cried so much when finishing this series, and I just want everyone to read this and appreciate it. It describes so well the feeling of being in a community, belonging somewhere, having friends throughout your entire life, like friends for life, and just like family dynamics, and being so invested in a sport, in a team as well. And I'm so certain that you will be able to find at least something to relate to in this. You just feel so much. It's so heartfelt, and like it really pulls at your heartstrings. Now, hopefully onto something I can describe a tad bit better. Legends and Lattes. This is a recent read of mine, and it's, as it says, high fantasy, low stakes. It's about this barbarian orc who does not want to be a barbarian anymore. She wants to open a coffee shop. The thing is that no one in this society or world knows what coffee is. It's very low stakes, it's very cozy. We get many details about how they build this cafe and what pastries they are baking and with what ingredients and how they make the coffee and how the customers are like, and like the marketing and how will we get more customers. It is set in a high fantasy world, so we have all of those magical creatures and so on. It's a feel-good book, it's a relaxing book, very slice of life-ish. We have Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is a comic or graphic novel about a vampire and a werewolf that starts dating. This is the quickest read you will ever read. I actually timed it when I read it, and I think I read it in like 8 minutes or something. It's so funny, and the art is great. The book looks beautiful as well. I think it's a perfect read for October. If you want to put a smile on your face, read this book. One thing for me that is very autumn vibes-ish are fantasies. There's something about reading fantasies during the autumn that just feels so special, especially for me in Sweden as well. Like, it gets darker, it gets cozier. Fantasy just works with that. A series I actually read during the autumn a few years back is the A Darker Shade of Magic series. These are only 2 books in that series. The 3rd book I've lent out to a friend. The series I claim to be the series that got me back into reading about 3-4 years ago. In this one, we're following the character Kel Maresh, who can travel across different Londons. We have Black London, Grey London, White London, and Red London. It's like parallel universes, kind of, but Kel is one of few people who can actually travel across these. So he uses blood magic to do that. And the entire magic system in this one is really interesting. It's elemental magic, but also how much magic there is differs between the different Londons. So Red London thrives with magic. Grey London is basically like our everyday sort of world. The thing that catalyzes this story is that Kel, he travels between these various Londons, and he sometimes brings some souvenirs with him. And one time when he's traveling across the Londons, he brings a souvenir that he shouldn't have, and this just starts something. I love these books. I actually need to reread them because it's been a while since I read them. The first time I read them, the only time I read them so far, I've given them all 5 stars. Also, these books are written by V.E. Schwab, who is a very popular and known author. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Gallant, Vicious, and I feel like most of V.E. Schwab's books could work with the autumn vibes, either for fantasies or for spooky reasons or for just cozy vibes. But for me, I wanted to give an extra shout out to A Dark Shade of Magic. These are very character driven. I personally adore most of the characters in these books. I also really enjoy the writing. It's very fast paced. It's not really that flowery. It's not really that lyrical. So if you're expecting Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, don't, because this is like the complete opposite of it, which I think is really cool that V. Schwab is so versatile in her writing. I think it's great. Read it. The final book I'm gonna mention, which is another fantasy, and I read it I think during the winter last year, but it kind of works for autumn as well, I would say, and that is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is an adult epic fantasy, high fantasy, with a revenge plot in it. We are following the character Tao, and Tao, he does not want to fight in the war, he doesn't want to become a soldier, he wants to run off with the girl he loves and spend his days not fighting, basically. He's not that type. But early on in the book, some things happen that makes him want to get revenge. He suddenly goes on this entire journey to become the best soldier, the best fighter, Like that is his aim, and he will go to whatever means necessary to accomplish this. This is a very interesting world that isn't fully explored in this book, but I think it will be further explored in these other books in the series. I really remember just enjoying the writing of this one, being very invested in the story, in Tao's journey. It's very much battle driven. Like, I would say that 90% of the book is like fight scenes, battle scenes, sword scenes. So if you don't typically enjoy those scenes, perhaps not the best recommendation, but I didn't mind them. I could tell that there was a lot of that, and I would have liked some more scenes in between that, in between all of those fights and battles, but I didn't really mind it. Yeah, once again, if you like character-driven books, I would recommend this one, actually. I think it was great, and I'm very excited to continue with the series. And those are my book recommendations for Autumn Vibes. Be honest with me now. What did you think of this list? To wrap this up, if there are some books that you must read for me this fall, it's the Beartown series, Warm Bodies, and let's do Fangs. That's it for this video. I hope you got something out of it at least. Also, please don't forget to give me your horror book recommendations. I'm already regretting this, but yes, please do that. And thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot. I hope you enjoyed. Please take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye!
You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before.